guys, today we're making some protein oatmeal raisin cookies for those of you who want to stay fit and does not want all of that sugary fattening cookies. Okay, so today we're gonna make those, and we have our wet ingredients and our dry ingredients. Okay, so for our wet ingredients, we're gonna add to a bowl 6 ripe bananas mashed. You're gonna have 3/4 cup of coconut oil melted. We're gonna have a tablespoon of vanilla. I'm gonna mix that all in here. Should look about this. It's okay if your bananas are a little chunky. I kind of like mine a little chunky. And for our dry ingredients, we have 3 3/4 cups of oats. We have 3/4 cup of coconuts, 3/4 cup of protein powder vanilla. We have a tablespoon and a half of chia seeds. We have a tablespoon and a half of cinnamon. And then we have a teaspoon and a half of salt. When we mix it all together, it's gonna look like this. Everything should be well incorporated when you mix it, okay? So now what we're gonna do is we're going to add our dry ingredients to our wet. Some will say add the wet to the dry, but then you miss out on all the goodness inside the bowl, okay? So you're just gonna add it in, and you're gonna fold it in neatly and nicely. It's gonna take a little bit of elbow grease because it does get thick. So you're gonna mix that all in. You could pour it all in at once. You could pour it in portions. Your preference. I like to pour mine in portions so I can get everything well mixed in before I add in the new batch, because you do not want clumps of cinnamon and stuff in there. So you want to make sure everything is well mixed in before you add in the next batch. And it is okay if yours is a little wet, because bananas are wet. Okay, it's not going to be a completely dry dough, but there shouldn't be a lot of liquid either. All right, so just mix that in. So it should be thick-ish. Well, thick, but it's still gonna be moist. Shouldn't be dried out. Okay. All right, so this is what it should look like, okay? Now, what you're gonna do, your oven should be preheated at 350 degrees. So what you're gonna do now is that you're gonna get your pan that you want to use. Okay, you got your pan. Now make sure your hands are nice and clean, because now you're gonna roll them into balls and put them on your pan. Okay, so I mean, depending on how many you want, depends on how many you get. I'm gonna use about a teaspoon for each cookie, right? About. It depends on how big you want your cookies, right? Because it's moist, it's gonna be really hard to roll. So I kind of just toss it around in my hand a little bit, get a little round. When you put it on your thing, you just flatten it out with your finger. So you're gonna do that until your tray is full, and then you're gonna bake them in the oven for about 10 to 12 minutes, depending on how much color you want on your cookies. Okay? So just gonna do that. Depends on the size that you want your cookies. This should make about 48 cookies, depending on how big you make them. All right, depending on how big you make them. And I said, just kind of flatten it out, make it look a little like cookie, because it doesn't have any baking powder, any baking soda, anything to make it rise. So the shape that you put it in is the shape that it's going to bake, and it's not really going to spread. There's not butter in there. There's no sugar. So all of your sweetness comes from your bananas and your applesauce. Okay. And just fatten them out a little bit. I do make my cookies a little big. You make them smaller, like around this size, you get about 48 cookies. I like big cookies, so I always add a little extra. Gets me a little less than 48. I like my cookies a little big, because when they're big, you only eat one, right? At least that's what I tell myself when I eat like 5 cookies. Right? So about a tablespoon and a half. As I said, it depends on how big you want your cookies. They don't have to be enormous, but you know, if you like smaller cookies, you can make smaller cookies. Just use a smaller amount of your hand. Just use a smaller amount of your dough. I don't know if you can really call this a dough. Just use a smaller amount of your mixture. All right. This one. You know, some may call this playing with your food, but I call it fun. All right. Just like that. Just make those, flatten them out a little bit. All right. Just flatten them out. And you kind of want them all to be the same size when you do them, so that they all bake evenly and they don't bake at different times. Okay, so now we're gonna put these in the oven for about 10 to 12 minutes. We'll come back and I'll show you what they look like when they come out the oven. Hi guys, so I'm just taking my cookies out the oven and I've let them sit on the pan for about 5 minutes. So now we're gonna take a spatula and we're gonna put them on a cooling rack to cool completely, okay? Just take it. And then half my family doesn't like raisins, so the first batch I made without raisins. For this recipe though, you will need 1.5 cups of raisins, and after you've added in your dry ingredients, then you mix in your raisins. Okay, so we're just gonna put these right here. So when you make them in whatever shape you want. So this one is kind of big and round, and this one is kind of flat, you know? So you just kind of make them in the way you want them, the shape you want. If you want them really thin, you make them really thin, flatten it out really thin. If you want them nice and thick, you could do that. If you want little balls, you can make them into balls, you can make them into squares. For this recipe, because there's no leavening agent, no baking powder, no baking soda, you kind of, they don't rise, they don't puff, they don't spread. So however you put them on the pan is how they're gonna come out. Okay, so once we make all of them, let them cool, I'm gonna show you what they all look like together. All right, I'll be back. Hi guys, I'm back. So these are the oatmeal raisin cookies, protein with raisins, and these are the ones without raisins. This is what they look like after they've cooled down on a cooling rack and everything. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Hope you guys come back. Thank you and have a good day.